Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Let's Pick This Up Next Week, where you talk to your two new BFFs who happen to be therapists, all about what goes on in a therapist's mind and some behind the scenes secrets of therapists. I am Dee, and we are joined by...
Hey, I'm DJ.
There's always that pause, like I'm not going to ask for your name, DJ. It's great. Well, welcome. So today we have a really lighthearted, beautiful topic. We're talking rejection. Everyone's favorite. Do you love being rejected, DJ? You're like rejecting my chance to try to talk to you here.
Rejection, yes. Definitely a interesting, emotional topic.
Rejection blows, dude. Like, I love how you put it so nice that I'm like, ugh. It blows.
Yeah, I think that I think that rejection is difficult, but I think if you asked me maybe like a year ago, how I would approach rejection as a therapist with like my clients, maybe a couple years ago versus now. Because like I study things like rejection, sensitive dysphoria for like people with ADHD, and I see rejection or abandonment stuff that comes up a lot with people with trauma. And I think like a lot of times I would approach it from like a CBT point of view and like changing thoughts, but changing thoughts to like
cognitive.
Yes, cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah,
Yes.
cognitive behavioral therapy is, basically right that the in a nutshell, right, the idea that if we changed our thoughts, we can change the way that we feel, the way that we approach things. But I think that I would have looked at rejection as like something like this is a rejection, and how do you adapt your thoughts and feelings and stuff when a rejection is going to happen, and going from it as after the rejection happens. But I do believe that if you have a different mindset, that rejection doesn't have to feel like rejection. That I will often say rejection is only a rejection if you make it a rejection, because people will say no to you. People will say they don't want to be with you. People will say these kinds of things. It doesn't mean that you're rejected per se. It just means that like that relationship or that thing isn't meant for you at that time anymore. Not that it still doesn't feel that way, but I think that if you can keep in mind that it doesn't have to be a reflection of your self-worth.
That's great. That reminds me off the top of like DBT, right? Because DBT says a lot of things about like decentralizing the emotion or the action from yourself, right? So like one of the biggest messages that I love DBT is don't say like I'm sorry, but to say I apologize, right? Because I'm sorry implies like I'm a sorry person when like I'm not. But I can apologize. That's an action. So you said something interesting there. You said like I'm not a rejected person. I've just been I didn't get this thing, right? I'm just was rejected by this,
And not that like it definitely, and I think you can do that work and you can whatever, but there's so many times that like it doesn't mean there's no emotion with it, but I think that it doesn't have to be like the overarching negative belief that I was rejected, that somehow my worth is assigned to this person, so that if this person doesn't give me that thing or that relationship or that job, then somehow that means that I'm rejected because someone else had that worth in their hand.
But what do you do when it's like, I find it easy. So like, let's talk jobs, for example. Like when I was job searching, I would find it easy of like, okay, if I didn't, I sent in my application and I never like heard anything, I'd be like, oh, that was annoying. But like, I wouldn't feel rejected because kind of like, yep, I put in, some effort. I did this thing, but they don't know me. They rejected this piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
But it's when I have gone to interviews and like, it doesn't happen. Here's my ego. It doesn't happen very often that I wouldn't get something, but sometimes it would. That's like, oh, like you'd get this literal rejection. They'd say, oh, we went with a different candidate. And it's like, oh, like, so you knew me. It was me you're rejecting. How do you make that feel less personal?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that it is different, right? Than like, and especially like the more personal that a relationship gets, then it feels more and more like a rejection. And even, if you think about like interviews, right? Or job applications, we call them rejection letters. Like when you don't get it, it literally is called that. But even still, like, if you go into a situation and you're interviewing for a job and you didn't get that job, it's still like, is that a rejection? Because yes, they picked somebody else. You don't know why they picked that other person. And there's a lot of research as to like interview order, how somebody showed up, like what somebody might say. Maybe they reminded them. You never know. There's always bias that comes from the interviewer anyway. So like they still don't know you. They knew you in the context of an interview. Like that's not as personal as like they know you. They're not like, we're not hiring D because like, oh my God, do we hate her? Right? Like that's not, they don't know enough about you. They don't have enough
Mhm.
information. So like in those situations, and I think, yeah, the more personal relationship is, but still, I really do think it comes about like, where do you assign your self-worth? That doesn't mean that you're not going to have an initial response that still feels like rejection for a breakup or that kind of stuff. But like, if you know that like my worth doesn't lie with another person, how can another person reject me?
My mind went so many different places because mentally I'm just like, but that's how we, get our worth, right? Is the world around us in ways, because it's not always just like, I know I'm intrinsically,
Hmm.
XYZ. But it is hard. So what about, like, I mean, it's easy to reframe, like you said, like when it's, you got that hour job interview. One time I was on a job interview that was 4 hours. It was
Oof.
like, my significant other texted me and was just like, have you been kidnapped? Are you still there? Like, what's
That's a,
happening?
that's
It was just
so,
it was just the
yeah.
the president of the company just chattering, just wanting
Mhm.
just wanted me to know how great he was. But anyway, I did
Uh-huh.
take the job. I didn't get rejected. I rejected them. So because they don't, that hour
Uh-huh.
the hour you could sit with that interviewer or whatever,
Uh-huh.
less than that a lot of times. So sure, we can rationalize, we can reframe, they didn't know me, but what about in those more interpersonal, like a
Mhm.
literal romantic relationship or a very close
Yeah.
friendship where it's like, oh,
Right.
now it's done or it's over. How do you
Right.
frame
And
that?
yeah, and I still think like, and I mean, and it's an interesting point of view, about like, where we get our worth. And I think like what you talked about, like DBT, and I definitely am a DBT therapist to my core. Like DBT is like what I love the most. And I think like, I believe that, and again, that means like, and you look at DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. If you look at DBT, right, that means that we have like our emotional mind, and we have like our rational mind,
Wise
right?
minds.
So
Yeah.
right, and our wise mind, yeah. So like, when you think about that, doesn't mean that you're never going to get like, you're a person who's reached like wise mind, like you're never going to get into your emotional mind. So I think that like in those times is when like rejection can feel so like high. But if you can get to a place of like your more rational thinking, your more wise mind, again, like, does my worth lie with another person? What you're saying too about like, why do you think, D, that like it seems like rejection comes from a group of people?
I think, like, playing devil's advocate here, right?
Mhm.
It's almost like evolutionary, right? Like,
It's
and
evolutionary. Yes, it
yeah,
is that. Uh-huh.
because we had to be people who
Mhm.
travel in packs and rely on other people for survival. And I
Right.
think even in today's day and age, where like you can survive off of like Amazon deliveries to your house and like an
Right.
internet connection, we still feel
Right.
like we need, that
Right.
connection that other people help us with our self-worth.
I think that here's what I think is even a more a way of mind that can help, like when that rejection comes up, is other people help with their self worth. Does it feel better to have connection with other humans and have friends and like that kind of stuff? Yeah, it does. But like that your self-worth though doesn't cease to exist if that friend group cease to exist. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, not to, I like it because Brene Brown like talk about like, she'll use big traumatic and tragedy examples to make a point. Not, I'm all about that too, but what if like you have your friend group, right, all the people you love so much, and like that's where your worth come from, and then they happen to all be on a bus, you're not on it, they're all on a bus and that bus crashes and they all die. Your self worth is gone.
Yes.
That's horrible.
Maybe, oh, I don't know about self-worth, right? But like a
Uh-huh.
lot, yeah. That's an awful example. Oh, that makes me sad.
Right.
Um, I don't want to think about that. I would feel my lack of self worth would come from, why wasn't I invited on the bus?
It could be
Why
so
wasn't
much.
I there? Why did I get invited?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm somebody who also has gotten very used to, like, I like to do things by myself. I like to do things with my friends, but I also like
Mhm.
to do things by myself. And so a lot of times it won't even occur to me to invite another person to do a thing. I'll see a thing and I'll be like, that's a thing I want to do. And I'll go do that thing. And then I'll post it on like Facebook or something like that. And I'll have a friend like message me. And like, I would have liked to have done that thing with you. Who'd you go with? I'm like, I didn't go with anybody. I just did that thing by myself. Right. Like, so, but if that person didn't reach out, they might be like, oh, DJ's there having a great time at this
Mhm.
thing, doesn't even care about me, like doesn't even like DJ always rejects me, never asked me to do anything. But the only reason I haven't asked is because I didn't think about any other person, and not in a selfish way. It's just, here's a thing I want to do. Let me get that ticket and go do that thing.
I get it. As someone who like, I'm also like, I love going out to eat by myself. I love taking myself to movies. The best trips that I have had that are like the most refreshing are like trips I take by myself. Like
Hmm.
just to, don't leave the cell phone in the room, like safety reasons. Like,
Right.
a woman traveling alone, so you got to think about safety. But just like, jumping on a plane and going somewhere for 5 or 6 days is like amazing to me. I've never
Hmm.
thought about it as me rejecting somebody because it's never just like a, you know what I mean? Like I don't reject anyone going. I just
Right.
go.
But I could take it that way, right? So that's what,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it that way, because like it's perception, right? So
It's
like,
perception.
yeah, depending on like what you think and what you're assigning, where you're assigning your worth, what you're assigning to that relationship, and like, oh, I can create a story. Whereas Dee traveling, 5 days by herself. When I'm free, Dee knew that I had 5 days off vacation and like didn't have anything else that I was doing. So Dee didn't ask me to go, and so like she obviously doesn't care about me. I mean, like, so that's where a
That's
rejection
some
can
leaps.
come up. What's that?
Yeah, that's some leaps to get there.
Yeah, yeah. But people
Yeah.
take those leaps, and I think that like, when you go on that trip, for you, you still have worth. When you go like anywhere, your worth really, and yes, I think connection is important, but also like I think that like if you know inside of you, and that helps to get like through that emotional mind of like, I'm gonna die without this person or whatever. If you can get to that through that emotional mind and get to the wise mind of like, I existed before this person, like I'll continue to exist after this person. And like rejection, it may be personal. That person may have decided they don't like me anymore. It may be personal, but it still doesn't have to be a reflection of who I
But I think we fill in the blanks sometimes. Like I feel like
am.
rejection would hurt worse if like somebody like, let's say like I was, close friends with someone and then, whatever argument, fight, relationship ended and there was something very like objective they could point to and say, "Hey, this happened. I recognize that that's just not something I'm cool with. Separate ways." I feel like that would
Mhm.
hurt less than just kind of like this. We as people are not that good at talking that openly with other humans.
Mhm.
Like we're just not. We're not good at it. So we fill in the blanks, right? Because that's what our brains are designed to do. Our brains are designed to keep us alive and for survival.
Right,
And for
right,
that to happen, we have to recognize patterns and put two and two together. And
right,
so,
right,
if it's like, oh, my friend didn't invite me when they, went to this really cool DJ, you have like the coolest life of like you just go to all these really cool like you're always like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to this thing tonight, and I'm like, that sounds amazing. Like, I would go if I was, not thousands of miles away from you.
yeah. I went to Melissa Etheridge on Friday. I literally like saw the tickets. Like, I'm gonna go, grabbed one ticket and like went. Like same day. Made the decision, saw the concert, did all the things one day.
I'm obsessed with that. That's amazing. But see, like, I would feel if I was like, oh yeah, like I would take that opportunity and fill in the blanks, right? Because our minds do that. So it's just like,
Right,
oh man, like,
right,
so somebody chose this over me, therefore I have less worth than this thing. Like, we
right.
fill in those gaps if we don't have clear answers.
Right, right. And especially, I'm glad that you say that because especially someone who's experienced, lots of trauma in their life, right? Who already has a negative self-belief of I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. So it's not as easy. Like that's why I like DBT too, because it does help with like trauma. Um, but you know, you're a brain or a person who has like had chronic trauma throughout their life. They have no other places to grab information than that. So like you're definitely more apt to fill in information with the worst case scenario because your brain is looking, where can I fill this? Where can I fill this? What can I fill this with? All you have to choose from is bad experiences. So you're going to pick up one bad experience that looks the most like what you can predict might happen and put it there.
Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
how we experience anything, how we view things, that's our reality. We make our own realities. I I kind of think that like there's no such thing as like an objective truth. That's
Oh,
like
yeah. Right,
objective always like there's no way.
right,
Like because it's
right.
even take like what we believe to be like factually true, like evidence based, or like
Mhm.
scientific. Our understanding of
Right,
that's the beautiful thing about scientific method is our understanding of science changes as our
right,
perceptions and our knowledge change over time. So I think the same thing of like that's the glasses that we put on in the morning, and sometimes they're rose tinted and sometimes they're not.
right,
It's just how you come into the situation.
right. Two things. But before we pivot to the other thing, talking about whether another person rejects you, quotes,
The quotes.
and whether you know, and how personal that relationship is, and dating on apps. So, what do you think about ghosting? Ghosting. What do we think about
Mm.
ghosting? Is that
Are we having
rejection?
specifics like
So early ghosting. So
way?
not like I've been dating somebody for a year and then I just like ghosted them. I mean, I think we can all agree that that's horrible and that's like
That's
no.
problematic.
I think you said something about like getting a reason. That reminded me. Like when you're like if
Mhm.
you can point out a thing. So like what if
Mhm.
you're getting to know somebody on a dating app and that person ghosts you? Is that rejection?
In a way, like by definition, yes, right? But then it becomes, is it rejection if it was mutual? Because there's definitely been times where it's kind of like I don't know, my ambivalence was met with someone else's complete, not resistance, but you know what I mean, like non-interest. And it's like, oh, okay, well, yes, technically it was rejection, but not really, because it was almost a mutual rejection. And then is it actually rejection? That's philosophical, honestly. But I think as someone who's ghosted, I think
Uh-huh.
ghosting is awful. I think you shouldn't ghost people.
Like if you but the thing is like so you're getting to know somebody on a dating app and you've talked maybe 3 days or something, right? And you're just
Mhm.
like, I can see that this person is not somebody that I want to continue or want to get to know. So you just like stop. Is that more awkward? Or is that, I mean, wouldn't like trying to have a conversation about why with someone that you don't know, is that you think what's more socially acceptable?
It's way more socially acceptable to ghost than to have a frank conversation. And frank conversations don't have to be, because we as people are really, really bad at being assertive. It's almost just
Mm-hmm.
being assertive. Like people think that assertive is like asserting your rights, right? But
Mm-hmm.
asserting is really just putting up, providing a boundary. And so to
Mm-hmm.
say like, hey, I really enjoyed connecting with you, but I'm just recognizing that perhaps this connection isn't the best one for either one of us. And so I really wish you the best of luck. And moving
Yeah,
on.
you don't think that's awkward
That's
for you don't think that's awkward for a relationship that doesn't have like a high level of like disclosure?
it depends what it is, right? Because it was like 3 days of like, okay, yeah, we go back and forth, and the conversation kind of fizzles because there wasn't. Yeah, some people are just like breadcrumb. What are you up to? What are you doing?
Oh
Ugh,
yeah.
ugh, that's
Mhm.
not
That's good.
conversation. I mean like actual conversations of like, okay,
Right.
we're sharing things about ourselves to some extent. Then it's like, yeah, like you should have a conversation so the person isn't just
Mhm.
like, what in the world?
Yeah, and like, you know, I mean, this is like not my therapist point of opinion at all, but just my personal point of view. Like I think like I mean, early on, do you is it more awkward to try and have that conversation than like the other person? But also like how much rejection is it if you're 3 days into getting to know somebody? Is that a rejection?
Rejection, yes, but high stakes or high value, no.
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
Because I mean, like we get rejected in certain ways all the time. Like
Hmm.
it's just how it goes. And that's like
Mhm.
pretty low level to me. Like that doesn't feel as personal. That doesn't feel as like high
Yeah.
stakes. It wasn't like, oh, I needed to get this job because it's my dream job. My whole life would change. And I wasn't, that person on the dating app for 3 days. I wasn't thinking they're my soulmate and now my life's problems are all solved. Right.
Right. Right. Right.
That's codependence when that happens. That's a whole
Mhm.
different,
Right. Yeah.
whole different thing.
Whole other episode. Here's the way that that I explain it, and then I want to talk about neurodiversity,
Mm,
or ADHD specifically. Um, so one of my nephews, he a couple years ago was talking about wanting to go to homecoming. But I asked him like, are you gonna ask somebody and he's like, there's this girl, and I'm like, what do you think? Like, are you gonna ask her? And he says, you know, I don't know if I wanna ask her. I'm not sure she wants to go, and I'm not the type of guy that gets rejected. And I
ooh,
and I said to him, it's like this. Like I was at my mom's house, and she eats butter pecan ice cream, which you can pay me to eat butter pecan ice cream. And so I'm like, it's like this. Some people like mint chocolate chip ice cream. And I was like, of course, the way that I like hyperboles and stuff, like some reasonable people like mint chocolate
bleh,
chip ice cream.
awful.
And some less
I don't want
reasonable
to eat toothpaste. I don't want to eat toothpaste for
no,
dessert. But anyway, please
see,
continue.
yeah. And some less reasonable people see that, like how differences are. You're proving my point. Some less reasonable people might eat like butter pecan ice cream. And
Mm.
I'm like, I don't know. People like your grandma, she's reasonable enough, but like that's a bad choice. Anyway, I say like some people like mint chocolate chip, some people like butter pecan. So you meet somebody, and might be like, you're kind of like mint chocolate chip to me. You're kind of like butter pecan to me. And like, I don't really like butter pecan. There's nothing wrong with it inherently. I just don't like it. Butter pecan is not for me. I'm more of a mint chocolate chip person. And so like I'm not gonna go to homecoming with you because, you're a butter pecan. Nothing against you. And so, it's just that like some people like things. That doesn't mean that like you're bad because you're not mint chocolate chip. I mean, we have different opinions on that. But it really, I think that like rejection works in that kind of way. It's just the message that like you're not for me. This job isn't for you. This whatever isn't for you. But it doesn't mean that on your own there's anything inherently wrong with you.
I think the slightly linked, but not exactly the same thing has to do with like self esteem almost. Cause like one of
Mhm,
the
mhm.
best things I've heard when people are like, they're really hard on themselves. Like you look at people and you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
they're attractive or whatever. And they're just like, oh my God, I'm hideous and whatever. And it's
Mm,
like, first off, you're wrong. Like you're being hard on yourself. But even people are like, hey, like I'm just not attractive. It's like, you're not your type. That's
right.
really what it is you're not your own
Right.
type, which like,
Right. Right.
that
Right. When
happens
people could date you.
sometimes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
more
Oh,
the thing
I
I
would
think
date the hell out of me. I would date the hell out of me.
I remember I remember, in my 20s when I had a rough time with like self-esteem and stuff like that. I mean, I would literally be like, I wouldn't date me. And I didn't mean my attractiveness, just like I would not date me. Also, I had some work to do on myself. Um, but neurodiversity to pivot a little bit. There's research out there about ADHD and rejection sensitive dysphoria, and talking about like how I don't know if we talked in other episodes about like for the ADHD person, it's hard to recognize what's good and bad anyway. Like with a spectrum of thing. So like with grades, like on a scale from A to F or an A plus to F, the only way to know what's good for an ADHD person is like you can get an A plus. That's clearly the best. It doesn't get any higher than that. So that's good. But like, is anything else good? It's hard to say because like that scale just doesn't make a lot of sense. So for also with an ADHD person, then anything that doesn't like include that person can feel like a rejection, no matter what it is. And also, so that happens, but also there's like a chemical reaction that happens, that's different from anxiety, that's different from other people. So like it's like a chemical reaction that's attached to that that can actually just come in and go away, like quicker than like spinning thoughts and like that kind of stuff with anxiety. And so, like, first, when I was working with people with neurodivergence, we'd talk about that chemical reaction. What do you do when that happens? How do you leave? Like, your dopamines and all the things like regulate and come back, and it doesn't feel as dangerous. Um, and it doesn't feel as big and overwhelming. But also, like, knowing then also how to recognize rejection and all that kind of stuff. But like, more like skills about like, what do you do when rejection sensitive dysphoria happens, because like it's really hard to combat. What are the skills? But I think you can get to a point again to learn that, like, it doesn't have to be rejection. It doesn't have to feel like rejection. It can feel like something else. But there is that phenomena only exists with rejection sensitive dysphoria. Doesn't come with anything else other than ADHD.
Interesting.
So it's a little bit different than the idea of rejection for other people, and just that, like, super sensitive to it, the the overwhelming sense, and plus the like chemical reaction that feels different than like the anxiety.
So it's not
rejection.
the same as like when I get my annual performance review and I just skim the page to see like what was rated as meets expectations and not exceeds expectations, and that was the only thing I focus on. It's different than that.
I mean, that's kind of the same as that scale, right? Like, if there's a scale of exceeds expectations and you meet expectations, that's perfectionism. And perfectionism can come with a lot of different things, but it does come with
yes.
ADHD as well. But not only ADHD.
I'm unfortunately well versed in things that come along with perfectionism. I'm a recovering perfectionist, so
yeah, me too.
But it comes down to like how we slant things again. So if I view meeting expectations as anything, like, to meet expectations isn't a bad thing. You did exactly what you needed to do, right? Like, you met expectations. I mean, same thing like when we talk about the grading scale. I mean, like, even when I was younger, they talked about like, a C average is average. Like, you're succeeding. You're doing what you need to do. But now it's like, if you don't have A's, right? We kind of create this requirement to be better than, but then ultimately, like, then everyone's expected to be better than. And then what are you better than? Like, statistically, not everyone can be better than anyone else. Like, it's just how it works.
Right.
Do you know, statistically, more people say that they're a better than average driver than statistically possible. It's like 70% of drivers think they're above average. And it's like, that's not how averages work.
On one hand, I'm not surprised. On the other hand, like, I'm a little surprised. Like, I feel like a lot of people who are bad drivers think they're good drivers. So like, it's not. But like the fact that like, right, like, statistically that doesn't make sense.
I'm an exactly average driver. I'm like, I'm all right. I'd be in a car with me, but like, would I drive a semi? No.
Oh yeah, I'm a better than average driver unless there's another person in the car with me, because it's hard. I can't talk and navigate at the same time. So if I'm like I have to make sure that, like, the co-pilot is on board to help me out when I miss the exit, because
I've driven with you. Yes, this is true. Sometimes I'm like, DJ, don't you know the way? This is like where you're from. Why do I have to tell you where to go? It's pretty great.
Yeah, I can't. It's hard for me to hold a conversation and navigate. I can hold a conversation and drive. Cannot hold a conversation, drive, and navigate at the same time. Impossible.
It's very challenging for sure. All right, so I want to ask you one kind of final question or conversation is talk about rejection. And one of the things that you said at the top made me think about the expression that we use sometimes: everything happens for a reason. What do you think about that phrase? Because that's a way to frame. That's what we always tell people when they're rejected. Everything happens for a reason. Right. We tell people that a lot, and it's gross. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, I used to be everything happens for a reason type of person. So like, I was one of those people that, like, always could, like, let me find the reason in this. But I don't think that's true. And I think that like, some things sometimes, right, like, sucky things just happen, and like, it doesn't and we can talk about this more, maybe a trauma episode, but like, it didn't happen for any reason. It happened because, like, bad things happen sometimes and not like any good reason for it. Like it shouldn't have happened. It sucks to happen. You don't have to find a reason in it. And I think like some 12-step programs use that mindset. And I think it can be hard. And so we're not looking for just harmful for somebody's recovery if like they can be like, why do I have to find a reason in this bad thing that happened?
I agree. I think we say it to people at awful times. We say it like when people lose someone, like for unexpected
Mhm.
deaths. And like, I'm like,
Right.
if we're looking for a reason, sometimes the reason is life is shitty. Like life is
Right.
shitty sometimes. Like that's sometimes the reason. But I think like not everything doesn't happen for a reason, but you can find reason in things. And by reason, I mean like purpose. And that's really
Right.
that like
Yeah.
resilience mindset, right? So the
Right.
idea that resilience is the opposite than a trauma response is it's looking at like, yeah, like I have, seen people who, I don't know, and just like try to tie it back to like being a therapist is like, I've treated people who like had the most horrific things happen in their life. And I sit here thinking like, that sucks, dude. You didn't deserve
Yeah.
that. That shouldn't have happened to you. So it breeds that kind of, whatever. It normally comes from a form of rejection or abuse or trauma. But their life has given me something to like work on, if that makes sense. Like I learn from their experience and I take it to other people. So even
Right.
though there might not have been a reason for their life, like why that
Right.
happened to them, they crossed my path and now I get to do something with that, if
Right.
that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. And I like what you said about purpose because I think that like you can look at something and be like, you know, is there something that I can learn from this?
Mm-hmm.
And apply that, I think that you can find purpose in something that happened, but it doesn't mean that like that happened to you for this reason.
Yeah, agreed.
Good.
But I
Yeah.
think we should stop saying that expression. Like, let's just
Oh,
stop.
yeah. Yeah. No, I
Can we
think
just
there's a
let's
lot of
reject that phrase? Yeah, let's completely just reject that phrase.
we'll
No more
reject
using everything happens for a
reject
reason.
that phrase
Yeah,
doesn't need any self-worth.
exactly. Yes. Yes. Let's just exclude it from everything.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I think honestly, it's probably a perfect place to end to talk about, just we're just rejecting some terms here.
That's
Um,
good.
but it's a lot of fodder for future conversations and like mentally bookmarking. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we should expand upon those points. So I would absolutely love as just like a little call to our subscribers. And first off, thank you for everyone who's like reached out and talked about what they enjoy about the podcast and things like that. It's just been awesome. So thank you. Please continue to interact, like, comment, review, subscribe, all of that stuff, whatever platform you're listening on or watching, engage that way. But also tell us like what are the things that you think about what we chatted about or things that we should continue to dive into the future? And also, does everyone agree we're going to get rid of the phrase, everything happens for a reason? So,
Sounds good.
well, thank you everybody for listening and watching. And we hope you have a great week. And we'll see you next week on Let's Pick This Up Next Week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.